I know you're not going to listen to this all the way through, but please, please just let me say it. Don't delete it. I wasn't going to lie to you. I swear to God, I wasn't. But when I saw what you left in the drawer, I panicked. I didn't know you knew. Not like that. Not with the bracelet. I mean, why would you go looking there? That drawer hasn't been touched since the fire. Listen, there's so much you don't understand. And I didn't mean for it to go that far, okay? He wasn't supposed to stay. I never meant for it to feel. Voicemail ends. Message deleted. That was the 11th voicemail. The 10th one was mostly sobbing. The 9th ended with her whispering my name like it still meant something. The 8th? That's the one I've played back at least 17 times. He wasn't supposed to stay. That line's been rattling in my skull like loose change in a dryer. You know what's funny? I didn't even check the drawer on purpose. I was looking for an old external hard drive. Thought maybe I could sell it. I'm trying to get out. Sell everything. Start clean. Somewhere far. Somewhere cold. Where no one uses the word soulmate or hangs wedding photos over the fireplace like trophies. But then I found the drawer. And the bracelet. And everything unspooled from there. It's this stupid little silver thing. A charm bracelet with these tiny, engraved pieces, each one with a letter. 5 in total. Doesn't sound like much unless you know what they spell. And I know, because I paid for that bracelet 6 years ago. And I remember every charm. But one of them isn't the same. One of them was changed. Swapped out. Mine said forever. Hers says for now. It's subtle. Blink and you'd miss it. But I didn't miss it. And I never would have missed it. So I took it to the jeweler. He remembered her. Not me. Her. He said she came in last month to have it updated. Said she seemed really happy. Like, glowing happy. This is the part where I should have left, right? This is where any sane person walks away. But I didn't. Because I saw something else on the receipt. It wasn't her name. It was a different one entirely. A man's name. Griffin. And now I can't sleep. I can't eat. I've been driving around the city for 3 hours, ending up at the same gas station, staring at the same damn voicemail notification. New message from Marigold. 2:42 a.m. She never calls me that late. Not unless someone's dead. So maybe something is. I didn't go home after the voicemail. I didn't even drive past it. I don't know why. I guess I was afraid of what I'd see. Lights on in the wrong rooms. Her silhouette where it shouldn't be. I didn't want reality to confirm what the voicemails were already whispering. Instead, I checked into a hotel. Not some fancy place. One of those weird mid-tier ones with a dimly lit lobby and a broken vending machine that only takes quarters. The girl at the front desk barely looked up from her tablet when I asked for a room. I asked for the top floor, as if height would make anything feel lighter. She gave me a key card with a sticky corner and told me the elevator was acting up. Of course it was. Room 712. That's where I started unraveling. I didn't sleep. I didn't even sit. I just paced in circles. The same thoughts kept looping like some broken vinyl record. Who is Griffin? What was she going to say after I never meant for it to feel? Feel what? Guilty? Real? Permanent? I pulled up our shared cloud account on my laptop. She didn't know I had it linked. Marigold's not exactly tech-savvy. She still says the Facebook, like someone's dad. I scrolled through her photo backups. Most were harmless. Screenshots of recipes she'd never cook. A picture of a dog she thought looked like mine from childhood. Then I saw a photo with no thumbnail. Just a black screen. Titled, 7F, Glass Room. JPEG. Something about it felt wrong. I clicked. At first, it looked like a reflection, dark glass at night, taken from inside a building. But as I brightened the image, I realized it wasn't a reflection at all. It was taken through the glass. From behind a one-way mirror. And in the photo, blurred by the lighting, were 2 people sitting on a couch. One of them was her. The other looked like a man. Taller. Wearing a maroon button-up. His face was turned, but there was something about the way he leaned in. Too close. Too familiar. My stomach dropped. I recognized the couch. Not because I'd ever seen it in person. Because I'd seen it in a hotel brochure. The same hotel I was currently in. I didn't even think. I grabbed the phone, hit 0, and asked, "Do you have a glass conference room or something on floor 7? There was a pause. The clerk said, "Sir, that area is not for guests. It's under renovation. How did you even?" I hung up. My body felt like static. My hands went cold. The couch. The mirror. The photo. It wasn't just an affair. It was planned. Deliberate. And whatever happened in that room, she documented it. Suddenly, I heard a knock. Not at the door. At the wall. 3 slow, steady knocks, coming from the room next to mine. Room 711. And then, my phone buzzed. New voicemail from Marigold. 3:09 a.m. I played it on speaker. Her voice was low, measured, not crying this time. You're in the same place, aren't you? I figured you'd go there. You always want to be above things when they get ugly. I'm not mad. I didn't want you to find out like this. I was going to tell you after Thursday. But since you're already there, you should know. He's in the building. Then the voicemail ended. Just like that. No explanation. No apology. Just he's in the building. I turned to the wall. And this time, there were no knocks. Just silence. Thick. Calculated. Like it was waiting for me to move first. I didn't sleep. Again. The knock from the room next door had vanished into silence, but it stuck to me like a rash. I stood by the wall until sunrise, waiting for something. Another sound. A voice. A hint of who he was. Nothing came. By 6:12 a.m., I was cracked open inside. I hadn't eaten in 24 hours. My eyes burned. My hands trembled every time I reached for my phone, hoping for a message that said this was all just a terrible misunderstanding. But the only thing that greeted me was another empty notification bubble. She hadn't called again. Not since that last voicemail, the one where she told me he's in the building. I needed to know who he was. Not the romantic other man. Not just Griffin. I mean the he that Marigold was afraid of. Because make no mistake, there was fear in her voice. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. The kind you can't fake. And whatever was going on, she hadn't just been hiding an affair. She had been protecting me. Or herself. Or maybe both. So I did something stupid. I left the room. The hallway was dead quiet, sterile, and humming with that low electrical buzz that hotels always have when you're alone long enough. Room 711 was just to the left. The door looked like any other door, but I felt the weight of it like it was made of iron. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. This time harder. Still nothing. I leaned in, half expecting to hear breathing, a cough, movement. But it was dead behind that door, like no one had ever stayed there at all. My brain, of course, being the overthinking parasite it is, started wondering if that knock I heard before had even come from that room. What if it was above me? Or below? But then I noticed something strange. At the base of the door, just barely peeking out, was a folded piece of paper. Not addressed. No room number. No name. I looked around. No cameras I could see. No one in the hall. I grabbed it. Back in my room, I unfolded it like it might explode. Inside was a single sentence, scrawled in red ink, that looked like it had been written in haste. He never checks out. That was it. No punctuation. No signature. No context. I stared at those 4 words until they lost all meaning. I tried calling the front desk, pretending to be someone else. Said I was from security. Asked if anyone was registered in room 711. The woman on the line was confused. She said, "Sir, that room is empty. Has been for a week. We're repainting that side." I hung up before she could ask more questions. I should have packed up and left. Should have driven somewhere far and isolated where even her voicemails couldn't follow me. But instead, I did the exact opposite. I checked room 711's handle. It was locked, of course. But then I noticed the cleaning cart down the hall. The maid had just walked into room 715 with her earbuds in. I didn't even think. I slipped the master key off the cart, walked back to 711, and slid it into the lock. Click. The door opened with a softness that made me nauseous. The room smelled like bleach and something older, like furniture that hadn't been moved in years. Everything inside was pristine. Bed untouched. Bathroom clean. Not even a wrinkle in the curtains. It looked like no one had ever used the room. Except for one thing. On the desk near the window, facing the hallway wall, was a hotel notepad. One page torn off. The second page was half indented, the pressure from what had been written before still faintly visible. I tilted it in the light. Used a pencil from my pocket to shade the page until the marks popped. 5 words. He knows about the bracelet. I dropped the pencil. Suddenly, the air in the room felt thicker, heavier, like it had mass. Like someone else was in there with me, watching. My breathing started to stutter. I backed out slowly, pulled the door closed, and walked fast, but not running, back to my room. I left the master key on the cart. When I locked myself back in 712, I just stood there staring at my reflection in the TV screen. The last voicemail kept playing in my head on a loop. He's in the building. I picked up my phone. Still no new messages. No missed calls. But something was different. At the very top of my screen, the name Griffin had appeared under my airdrop suggestions. Just floating there. No one else was nearby. Just me. In room 711. I didn't touch the airdrop request. I just stared at it, frozen. You ever get that feeling where something makes no logical sense, and your brain refuses to even process it, like a pop-up in your life that says, this shouldn't be happening? That was me, standing in the center of a hotel room that was never meant to hold truth, watching a stranger's name, Griffin, float like a ghost across my phone screen. No device details. No profile pic. Just Griffin, nearby, waiting. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. No trace. No history. Like it had never been there. The room started to feel smaller, like the walls were subtly leaning in. I opened the window to get some air, but all it did was let in more silence. My brain felt like it was shivering. I needed to ground myself. I needed to see her again, not in photos, not in voicemails, in real life. I needed to look into Marigold's eyes and figure out whether she was lying, or if I had finally gone completely insane. I packed my stuff, left the key card on the table, and made it all the way to the lobby before my legs stopped working. Something about leaving felt wrong, like I wasn't done yet. I asked the front desk if they had a business center or archives for guests. The woman looked confused but nodded and pointed toward the back of the hotel, past the conference rooms, past the pool and gym, down a hallway with no lighting and a warped carpet. I followed it until the texture beneath my feet changed to tile, and I found myself standing in front of an unmarked gray door. It didn't have a handle, just a push bar. I pressed it. Inside was a narrow room lined with filing cabinets and yellowing paper binders, the kind you see in old medical offices or government buildings that forgot the internet existed. A single motion-activated bulb blinked to life overhead. I had no plan, no justification for being there. I just started looking for anything marked guest logs or room history. I didn't even know what I expected to find. Maybe a paper trail proving Griffin had stayed there, or confirmation that 711 wasn't really empty. That's when I found the black binder. It wasn't labeled like the others. No year, no room block, nothing. Just a hotel logo burned into the front, slightly crooked. I opened it. Inside were pages printed on thick paper, not regular office stock. Each page was a profile, like a personnel file, but more clinical. Name, photograph, date of stay, room number, notes. Most of the pages had nothing alarming. Business travelers, couples, one woman listed as a grief consultant, whatever that meant. But then I reached a page that made my fingers lock. Subject, Marigold Ivy Cullen. Date of visit, redacted. Room, 711. Companion, Griffin E. Mallory. Notes, Level 4 emotional containment successful. Recommend memory anchor extraction no later than 6 weeks post-final session. Subject unaware of full engagement protocol. Do not allow contact with secondary anchor, Percival J. Cullen, until debrief is complete. I must have read it 10 times before my knees gave out, and I sank to the cold tile floor. What the hell was this? Level 4 emotional containment. Memory anchor extraction? Engagement protocol? This wasn't a hotel. Not really. This was a front. A stage. And my marriage, my whole reality, had been part of some kind of experiment. And then it hit me. Percival J. Cullen. They had my name on file. They knew I'd find this. The room began to hum. Not loudly. Just a faint vibration in the air, like static crawling under my skin. I stuffed the page into my hoodie, slammed the binder shut, and stood up too fast, nearly blacking out. But just before I left, I noticed a post it stuck inside the back cover. It wasn't official looking. Just a casual note written in smudged pencil. If you're reading this, you're too late to stop it. But maybe not too late to understand it. I stumbled back down the hallway, heart thrashing against my ribs. Everything felt unreal. The carpet, the walls, the elevator music echoing from somewhere above. When I got back to my car, there was a man standing beside it. No uniform, no badge, just standing there, too still. I called out, "Hey, can I help you?" He turned. I recognized him. The same man from the photo. The one in the maroon button-up. From the couch. From the glass room. From my wife's bracelet. Griffin. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You shouldn't have gone into the archive, Percy," he said calmly. "But I'm glad you did. You deserve to know the rest. Then he reached into his coat pocket slowly, like he didn't want to scare me, and pulled out my wedding ring. The one I hadn't noticed was missing. He held my wedding ring like he was offering me a mint. Calm. Casual. Too calm, actually. His fingers never twitched, his shoulders didn't move, and his eyes, they were hollow in a way I couldn't understand. Like someone who's done this before. Many times. Too many. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the ring. It looked like mine. Scratched on the inside where I once dropped it on a hiking trail in Yosemite. But something about it was off. It looked newer. The metal had no wear. Like it had been cleaned, polished, maybe even replaced. I hesitated to touch it. Griffin noticed. You want to ask how I have it, he said. But you should be asking when I took it. He smiled. No teeth. Just that awful, half-smirk people make when they already know how the story ends. I took a step back. He didn't follow. I'm not here to hurt you, Percy, he said. You were never the target. You were the control group. What the hell does that mean? I asked. I could barely hear myself over the sound of my pulse. He ignored the question and reached into his coat again, slower this time, careful not to startle me, and pulled out a small black envelope. The kind you'd expect to find at a boutique funeral. My name was written on the front in all caps. Inside was a photo. A printed one. Not digital. Not filtered. Thick glossy paper, still warm from lamination. It was me and Marigold, sitting together at a diner booth. Smiling. She was holding my hand across the table, and I was wearing a t-shirt I've never owned. The weird part, the diner didn't look familiar. The decor was all retro, green leather seats, vintage Coke posters, analog jukebox on the wall. It looked like a scene from the 80s. The date on the back, written in pen, May 3rd, 1986. That's impossible. I wasn't even born until 92. Where did you get this? I snapped. He tilted his head. You don't remember that day? I wasn't alive in 1986. You were. Just not like this. I couldn't take it anymore. I shoved him. Hard. He didn't react. Didn't fall. Just adjusted his coat and said, you should ask her about the version before you. She'll remember that much. The rest has probably been wiped. And then he walked away. Calm as ever. Not in a rush. Not trying to escape. Just walked across the parking lot like he was heading home after a long shift. I almost followed him. But then I looked down at the ring still clutched in my hand and realized something that made my blood turn to ice. The engraving on the inside wasn't the one I had etched when we got married. That one said, to my constant, forever and ever. This one said, Cycle 5, PJC, cleared 1108. Cycle 5. I dropped it. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't go back to the hotel. I couldn't go home. So I drove to the one place I used to go when I needed clarity, my childhood neighborhood. My parents' old house was gone, torn down years ago, but the swing set in the abandoned park still creaked the same way. I sat there for hours, watching nothing, listening to the kind of silence that only exists in places people forget. And then my phone buzzed again. New voicemail. Marigold. 3:47 a.m. I didn't want to listen, but I did. Her voice was calmer now, like she had made peace with something. You weren't supposed to find out, Percy. You were supposed to heal. That was the point. You were always grieving. Since the very beginning. But it got tangled, the script collapsed. And when you saw the bracelet, it triggered everything we buried. I told them you weren't ready. I begged them not to reset you again. There was a pause. Then she whispered, please don't go back to the house. Not until I can explain what it used to be. What we used to be. Before Griffin. Before all of this. I still have the photo of the real day we met, but I don't think you'll recognize me. The message ended, and I realized something truly awful. I didn't remember the day we met. Not really. I remember a version of it. A sunset. A bookstore. Her laughing at my socks. But now I wonder if I remember it because I lived it, or because someone gave it to me. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was rising, and the sky was bleeding orange like it was ashamed of what the night had done. I didn't even remember making the decision to return. My body just drove, like it knew something I didn't. Or maybe I was just too tired to resist the pull of a familiar place, even if that familiarity had turned into something venomous. The house looked the same, but only from the outside. I stood in front of it for a long time before I unlocked the door. Keys in hand, hand on knob, heart in my throat. The air felt thinner here, heavier, like stepping into a memory I hadn't consented to. When I finally pushed the door open, I expected to be hit with something, regret, rage, even her voice. But it was worse than that. It was silence, except for the ticking. A metronome, somewhere in the back room. We didn't own a metronome. I stepped inside slowly. Everything was in its place. The couch, the bookshelf. Even the mug I left out 3 days ago was still on the table. The tea inside now turned into a cold amber stain. But none of it felt real. The colors were too sharp. The shadows too symmetrical. It felt like a memory rendered in high resolution. Like someone had tried to rebuild this house, but hadn't lived in it. I walked into the bedroom. Empty. Sheets tucked too tightly, like a hotel room between guests. No signs of Marigold. No clothes. No scent. No presence. It was like she'd never slept here. Like I'd never slept here. I followed the ticking. It led me to the back office. A room we almost never used. I had always assumed she kept her art supplies in here. She was a painter once. Before the marketing job. Before the long nights and the emotional distance. The metronome was on the desk. But it wasn't ticking on its own. It was playing through a speaker, plugged into a hard drive. And next to it, blueprints. Architectural blueprints. Of our house. Only they weren't the same as I remembered. Walls that didn't exist. A corridor that never ended. A second floor that had never been built. Even the exterior was slightly wrong. Our address. But a different roof shape, different window layout. Like a copy drawn from memory. But not mine. And at the bottom corner of each page, a stamp. Property of Aurora Systems, Cycle 5, Control Site Alpha. There it was again. Cycle 5. I spread the blueprints out, page after page, and found something on the last sheet that made my skin crawl. A room labeled False Memory Insertion Chamber, Sublevel B, directly underneath where I was standing. There was no basement in our house. Never had been. I knew that. I helped build the deck. There was nothing underneath. And yet, the blueprint insisted otherwise. Just then, the front door creaked open behind me. I turned, heart in my mouth. It was Marigold. No makeup. Hair wet. Wearing a gray hoodie I'd never seen before. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. She looked like someone who had already made peace with something unforgivable. Close the door, I said. She did. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then, in the softest voice, she said, "You weren't supposed to find the blueprints. They told me you'd never get that far." "Who are they?" She walked past me and turned off the speaker. The ticking stopped. Silence fell like a curtain. She ran her fingers along the edge of the desk before sitting on the floor, legs crossed like a child. I remained standing. If I sat, I wouldn't be able to get back up again. "You were grieving," she said. "When you came to them. When you applied. I was too. That's how they match people." "I didn't apply for anything," I snapped. "You did," she whispered. "Just not in this version." I wanted to scream. But I needed the truth more than I needed catharsis. "What the hell is Cycle 5? She winced, like the phrase physically hurt her. "It's the 5th reset," she said. "The 5th time you and I have been paired. Every time something breaks, something in you, they restart. Adjust the scenario. Tweak the parameters. The bookstore meet cute? That wasn't real. The honeymoon in Lisbon? That was fabricated. The argument over the yellow wallpaper in the guest bathroom? That actually was real. You always hated yellow. No matter what version we're in." I felt dizzy. "You're saying our entire marriage was constructed," she said, "carefully, to help you heal. But you never did. You'd get better for a while, then collapse again. You never stayed stable long enough for full release." I told them it was cruel to keep trying, but they said the results were too promising. I dropped into the chair, my hands shaking. What was I healing from? She looked up at me, and there was something so heavy in her eyes it felt like it could bend time. "Your real wife," she said. "The one from Cycle 0. Her name was Elise. You lost her in a house fire. You were trapped. They pulled you out. You wanted to die. You begged them to erase everything. So they did. And when they built this world for you, they assigned me to it. And Griffin?" She looked down. "Griffin monitors the emotional ceiling. When the simulation starts to exceed safe limits, he steps in. You saw things you shouldn't have. The bracelet. The photo. That wasn't supposed to happen. This version was collapsing. They were going to reset again." "Why didn't they?" Her voice cracked. "Because this time." I said no. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Just silence, thick and full of consequence. Marigold sat with her hands folded in her lap, like a student waiting for detention. I sat in the old leather desk chair that felt suddenly unfamiliar, as if the grooves worn into the seat weren't made by me at all, as if I had been borrowing someone else's life, mistaking it for mine. When I finally found my voice, it didn't sound like mine either. What happens after cycle 5? Her eyes lifted slowly to meet mine, and for the first time, I saw regret in them. Not the mild, scripted kind you see in arguments or therapy rooms. This was deep regret, the kind that came from breaking something you once believed you could protect. There isn't supposed to be a cycle 6, she said. They never planned to let it go this far. The results were too unstable after 3. You became unpredictable. I became unpredictable. I laughed, but it cracked halfway through. You erased my memories. You fabricated a life. You dropped a man named Griffin into my marriage like he was part of a goddamn update patch. And I'm the problem? You were in pain, she said quietly. You begged for relief. You signed consent in every version, Percy. Then show me, I demanded. I want to see cycle 0. I want to remember Elise. Marigold flinched at the name, like she still carried some ghost of guilt for even saying it. You can't remember Elise, she said. Not without damaging what's left. Her image was removed with a surgical block. You asked for a full rupture. They honored that. I don't care, I snapped. I'd rather feel it than live inside this lie. She stood up. Her legs were trembling, but she didn't hesitate. She walked to the bookshelf and pulled back a hollow spine from a thick, untouched hardback called The Ethics of Sleep. It clicked, and the bookshelf slid open just 2 inches. Behind it, dark stairs. Downward. Into a space that should not exist beneath a single-floor house. My heart raced. I followed her. The air grew colder with each step. Not freezing, but calculated. The temperature of a lab trying to preserve variables. And that's exactly what it was. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement opened into a long white corridor lined with doors. Metal, unmarked, cold. One door at the end was open. Inside, a small, sterile observation room. 2 chairs. A console. A wall of monitors, all black except for one. A looping video file with a timestamp, cycle 0, day 428. She sat at the console, entered a code I wasn't supposed to know, and then she looked back at me one last time. You asked to see it. Just remember, Percy, you didn't survive it the first time. Then she hit play. The screen came to life. I saw me. Not quite the me I know now. My face was more hollow. My posture broken. I was in a hospital bed, hooked to machines, mumbling nonsense under my breath like I was stuck between languages. And beside me was her, Elise. She was blurry at first, but then she leaned in to brush my hair back. And I saw her, and everything inside me screamed. I remembered. It didn't come in flashes. It came all at once. The fire. The kitchen. Burning. Screaming. Elise trapped behind the flames. My body breaking a window. My lungs filling with smoke. My hand on the doorknob. Her hand on the other side. And then, gone. I dropped to the floor. My knees buckled. My throat locked up like it was trying to strangle the truth before it could escape. The tape continued. She was reading me a letter, crying as she did it, telling me to let go, that she loved me, that she knew I would try to hold on, but that I had to move on. I don't want to be the reason you stop living, she said. And I know you. You'll never stop trying to fix something that can't be fixed. The monitor flickered. Static. And then the feed switched to a room labeled Cycle 1 Initiation Chamber. I watched them walk me in. Clean clothes. Blank face. A woman waiting at the other end. A woman I didn't recognize. Marigold's predecessor. She stood up. Smiled. Held out her hand. Hi, I'm Riley. I think we're supposed to be married. I hit pause. I've done this before, I whispered. Marigold was crying now. Silent tears. 5 times, she said. Each time with new settings. Sometimes you were a writer. Sometimes an engineer. Once, you didn't speak at all. I felt sick. And you've been in all of them? She shook her head. I came in at cycle 4. I volunteered. I read the reports. I thought I could help you heal. I thought love, even simulated, might be enough. But it wasn't. It never is. I stood slowly, my body barely holding itself together. So what now? I asked. Another reset. She hesitated. No, she said. They've shut down the program. Your mind's degrading. Too many cycles. Too many artificial memories. If they run another one, it'll erase you entirely. I swallowed hard. So what's left? She looked at me with the kind of love that only exists when you know someone and love them anyway. You get to choose, she said. You can stay here and live out what's left of this cycle with full awareness. Or we can unplug everything and you wake up in the real world, alone. I closed my eyes and saw Elise's hand on the other side of the burning door. For a long time, I didn't say anything. I just stood there, between the monitors and the silence, between two women I had loved in two very different ways, between versions of myself I no longer recognized. My thoughts felt like shattered glass, too jagged to hold, and yet impossible to let go. The screen beside me still showed that frozen frame from Cycle 1. My face, before the resets. My mind, before the rewrites. And that woman, Riley, smiling like love was something you could install. I looked over at Marigold. She was no longer crying. She just watched me, waiting, not pleading, not persuading. Just waiting. Like she knew this was never her choice to make. That it never should have been. This world isn't real, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. No, she agreed. But the pain was. So was the love. I nodded. Slowly. I believed her. That was the hardest part. You said if I unplug, I'll wake up. In the real world. Yes, she said. But not with her. Elise is gone, Percy. That part's not fiction. There's no version of this where you get her back. And if I stay? She hesitated. The cycle will stabilize. No more resets. No more edits. You'll keep your memories this time. No lies. Just what's left of us. And time. For a second, the idea of it made me dizzy. To stay in a world that had been engineered, sculpted, faked. And yet, some parts of it felt more real than anything I could remember outside of it. I looked around the room again. The white walls. The hum of power feeding a life that was only ever meant to simulate healing. The basement under a house that didn't have stairs. The woman who loved me, even if she'd been assigned to. Then I made my choice. I don't want another reset, I said. But I also don't want to live in a lie. Not anymore. She nodded, swallowing hard. So the unplug? She asked. I shook my head. No, I'm not leaving. But not for the reasons they programmed. She looked confused. I'm staying, I said. Because even if this started as fake, I know who I am now. I know what I lost. And I know what I still have. Whatever time is left, I want it to be honest. I want to make this real. Tears welled in her eyes again, but she smiled through them. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't polished. It was messy, cracked, real. I was hoping you'd say that, she whispered. And then she walked over to the console, pulled the main power lever. Not to reset, not to erase, but to end the program. Not the world. Just the controls. The machinery powering the illusions dimmed. The monitors turned off. The hum of surveillance faded. We walked back upstairs together, and for the first time, the house felt human. Imperfect. The way a house should feel when two people have lived 1,000 different versions of love inside it. We sat on the couch. The real one. No cameras. No scripts. Just us. And I asked her something I'd never asked before. What's your real name? She looked over and smiled, tucking her legs under her like she'd finally exhaled. Not Marigold, she said. That was their name for me. She paused. My name is Lena. I repeated it. Softly. Lena. It felt good to say something real. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I let her. I didn't think about Elise. Not with guilt. Not with regret. Just gratitude. For loving me before the fire. For being my anchor in the memory of what was. And for somehow letting go so I could keep going. The world outside didn't stop. Bills still needed paying. My hand still shook sometimes. Some mornings, I woke up wondering if any of it had ever been true. But when I looked at Lena, I saw someone who chose to stay, not because she was assigned to, but because she wanted to. And every time I held her hand, I remembered the fire. But I also remembered walking out of it. Still breathing.